Fabulous. Thanks everybody for joining us. Welcome back to another Michael's Community Classroom. We're so excited to be here with Marley today with a really fun crochet summer top. Super excited for this class. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. If you are a repeat visitor, welcome back. And just for reference, if you have any questions throughout the class, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll try and get to as many as we can. I am Allie W. from Yarn Inspirations, and I'll try and help you out as much as I can throughout the class. And we'll get any questions over to Marley that we need her help on. So thank you all so much. And I think we're ready to pass things over to you, Marley.
Awesome. Well, hello, everybody. I feel like I haven't been on one of these classes forever, and it's only been like a week. So it's been an eventful week. Hello and welcome. We are doing this very cute tee. Let me see. I want to get the correct name. The crochet tee top is what this is called. And it's a very, very simple construction crochet project. I'm going to walk you through the stitches you need to know to create this project. And then just because I know there are so many of you who maybe have never done armholes or a neckline and whatnot, I'm going to talk to you about how to plan out and follow the instructions. That way you can get some armholes and a nice neckline in the piece. This is a free pattern available at yarninspirations.com, but I think Allie is going to put the link in the chat. And we're going to find out. So many of you are saying, hi, Paula McGee from Indianapolis. I'm in Fishers. And then hi, Belinda from Colorado. I grew up in Littleton. So it's like old friends coming home. Thank you. They like my hat. It was a discussion whether I was going to wear my hat or not, guys. So thank you. I'm glad you like my hat. I just want to make sure that everybody does have the patterns that you can follow along with me today, because that is going to be important. And I'm pretty sure we're good here. Allie, are we good? Let's see here. She is on mute, so I'm not real sure. There you are.
Give me just 1 second to get this added in here.
All right, cool. While we're doing that, I want to say hello to all of you some more. I mean, all across the world, everybody here. Northern Colorado, way to go, CSU Rams, let's go. Michigan and Georgia and Aberdeen, Maryland, and Rockin', California. So many. All right, so Allie has included the link to today's pattern in the chat, so that way you guys can totally find it there. And we're going to jump in. And I think the first thing I'm going to do here, Felicia, is I'm going to do a screen share of the pattern, if that's all right, just so I can talk about the different areas they need to pay attention to. Is that okay? Give me a thumbs up, Allie. Is that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, cool. I just want to make sure we're good with that. All right. So I'll come over here and do a screen share. And hopefully all of you are able to see the pattern. I'm pretty sure you can. This is the pattern that you were given the link in the Google Drive. It's a Yarn Inspirations pattern. As I mentioned, it's the crochet tee top. Various things that we need to pay attention to when we're talking about patterns that include a bunch of different sizes. The first thing we're going to look at is right down here in the materials. And I don't think I can highlight it. Oh, maybe I can. So right here in the materials, this is important because this tells you exactly what yarn was used and what hook was used to achieve the gauge given for the pattern. So we used Caron Angel Cakes for this particular pattern, and that is exclusive to Michael's. You can get that yarn over at Michael's. And as you're looking down here, you'll see that it says size extra small to small, medium, large, extra large, 2X and 3X, and then 4X and 5X. And then it gives you the number of balls you need underneath. So depending on what size you plan on making, that's how much yarn you will need to get, okay? And that is purely based on if you achieve gauge. Now, if you don't achieve gauge, say that you accidentally start crocheting a little bit bigger, you could need more yarn. So you want to be very careful with that. Down here, you'll also see that it says, in order to achieve gauge, the designer used a size H or an 8 or a 5 millimeter crochet hook. All of those mean the same thing. Does that mean that you have to use a size H or 5mm crochet hook? No, it does not. It means you use the crochet hook that you need to get the same gauge as the designer. And when I say gauge, that's going to pop right over here to the right side of the screen where it says gauge 17 stitches and 18 rows equals 4 inches or 10 centimeters in pattern. What that ultimately means is that, hey, in order for you to get a product that is the correct size, your stitches need to measure exactly what these stitches measure, because these are the measurements I didn't design it, but the designer used to get the measurements that you need for your project. Does that make sense? So before you would start a project like this, you would do a gauge swatch, and you could do one like what I'm going to be working on today and just kind of work through some of the stitches and then measure your piece. And you want to do a nice substantial size gauge swatch. You don't want it to just be like a little tiny, like 2 inches by 2 inches, because the fabric you're creating is obviously going to be larger than that. And the weight of the fabric is going to have a big part in the garment. So you want to make sure that you are taking a look at your gauge all around when it comes to your piece. Okay. So when gauge is not that important in blankets and shawls and most accessories and such, it is important when you're making garments because you want to make sure that they fit. And speaking of fit, there are 2 different measurements here that I want to make sure we talk about. We have the to fit bust measurement and then the finished bust measurement. What that is essentially telling you is how much ease the garment is intended to have. And don't be stuck on that word ease. All that simply means is how much space do you have between your body and your actual fabric. Okay, so if your bust is, for the example here, either 28 inches to 34 inches, you're going to make a garment that is 40 inches. So that's a lot of positive ease. It's 6 inches of positive ease on the higher end of the 34 there. It's 6 inches of positive ease, which you might be like, well, wait a minute. If I'm standing here and here's my bust and I add 6 inches this way, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, that's so large. Just remember that 6 inches is all around your body. So it's not just 6 inches directly out from your bust. It's 6 inches in total around the circumference of your body. So 6 inches really isn't a ton. More often than not, if you go find your favorite sweater or favorite garment you like to wear and measure the garment and compare it to what your actual bust measurement is, that's where you could decipher what kind of ease you actually like to wear. It could be that you like very form-fitting stuff. Maybe you have a figure that's very flattering and you like things that have negative ease. That's where you wear something and it actually like kind of, I don't want to say suctions in onto you, but like you guys all know, like ribbing, like you could get a ribbed t-shirt and you could pull it out and it stretches really far, but in its relaxed form, it looks like it's like this big, but then you put it on your body and it forms around your body. That would be a negative ease because the actual measurement of the piece is like this, but you're like this, but the body like stretches out. Does that make sense? So the important thing here is, say you have decided you know what kind of ease you like, and maybe 6 inches isn't enough for you. Maybe you want more than that. Well, then that's where you're really going to pay attention more to the finished bust measurement versus the fit bust measurement. Okay, so like for myself, I am a 52-inch bust. I am right there between a 2XL and a 3XL. So when I look down here, I can see on my fit bust measurement, I would be right there between the 2 and the 3X, which means my finished would be a 58, which is 6 inches of positive ease. Now, I know that 6 inches positive ease is relatively comfortable for me, so I probably would go on with that. But let's say just because it wasn't a very comfortable thing for me, I could make a conscious decision to make the larger size or make a conscious decision to make the smaller size. You have to decide what's best for you. The good news is the pattern gives you all the information you need as far as, hey, this size here is meant to fit this size. So we don't have to be one of those people that walks into a department store and we go over to, let's just say like Liz Claiborne, and I don't even know if Liz Claiborne exists anymore, but you know, maybe you go to a Liz Claiborne shirt and you know that maybe they fit tighter, but if you went over here to I don't know, some other brand. I can't even think of a brand right now, like Ralph Lauren, and you know it fits a little bit bigger, you're going to go over here versus over here, or vice versa. I don't know. I have no idea. Like, I'm totally just making those assumptions up. I have no clue. The point here is that when you're looking at how much yarn you need, you want to make sure you're choosing the right amount of yarn for your finished bust measurement size you want to make. Is that clear? Does that make sense to everybody? I really hope so. Okay. I'm going to scroll up here because, well, here, I'm going to come back down here real quick. Obviously, we have abbreviations here. If you don't know what something means, you can always come up here to the abbreviations to read through any particular stitch that you need a little bit of help with. But as I come down here, this is where the instructions for the top happens. And you might be like, oh my gosh, it's only one page of instructions. Well, you're absolutely right. And the whole reason for that is because after you make the front, the back right here is made exactly like the front without the neck opening. So you're going to make the back just like the front, but you're not going to do any of the neck opening. Okay. You'll do everything else the same. So if we can work through the front here, we'll be good to go. Now, one thing I really love about yarn inspirations patterns, especially when they're talking, when they come out with things that have different sizes, is they color code all of the numbers. So if you're a person like me, so I already told you guys, I'm the 2X, 3X. So I know I'm the purple color there, right? So whenever I go through all of these numbers and there's an instance where all the numbers are given, where it's not just one number for all the sizes, where it's like each size has their own specific number, I know instinctively, or not instinctively, because I've already been told that whenever I see the purple, that is my number that pertains to the size I'm making. Now, if you happen to be colorblind or you need a little bit more of a, hey, pay attention to me sort of situation, you can always print out this particular pattern and take a highlighter and go through and highlight all of the numbers that pertain to you. Because as you read across these numbers, if there's a number that's outside the parenthesis and then a bunch of numbers inside the parentheses, that is letting you know that, hey, for the different sizes, you're going to have a different number. So you want to make sure you're always following along with the number that pertains to the size you're making. Now, obviously, if you look here, it says second round, third round, and then all of these, it's just black numbers. They're just numbers that pertain to all of the sizes until you get to where it tells you how much you're supposed to work something, like how long, like 12 inches, 13 inches, 14 inches, so on and so forth. Okay. Hopefully that makes things a little bit clearer for everybody, because that is my ultimate goal here, is to make sure you can tackle these patterns beyond this one. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to my hands and we're going to jump in. I have already done a chain. I think I chained 25, I either chained 25 or 23, I can't remember. And then I've gone ahead and I've double crocheted in the fourth chain from hook and in each chain to the end, because I figured if you're in this class, you already know how to do double crochets, so you didn't need to watch me do that, but we can jump into the pattern. So I'm not going to be following along with the exact numbers in the pattern, because honestly, you don't need to sit here and watch me make an entire size small sweater. You need to know the specific details so that you can use those numbers for the size you're going to make. All right, everybody good with me there? All right, good. All right, I'm gonna squeeze this up so I can actually see the instructions. And here we are. So you're at my hands. Everybody sees my hands, right? Woo, okay. Can we appreciate my manicure? Because it took forever for me to go and get that. Okay, so I am using an H hook. I'm just using a plain worsted weight yarn here so that you can hopefully easily see the stitches. As I mentioned, I'm pretty sure I chained 20, it's either 23 or 25, I can't remember. But then I double crocheted in the fourth chain from hook, and then in each chain all the way to the end. So I ended up with an odd number of stitches. And in the instructions, you'll see that it tells you this first those skip chains that we did, they're going to count as a stitch. They're going to count as a double crochet, which is why I added a stitch marker. You don't have to, but I did it so that way I remembered to tell you guys. So when you get to the end of the row, however many stitches you have, you're going to turn your work, and we're on the second row. So this is where I'm picking up my work so everybody can follow along. Right here it says chain 2. So we're going to chain 2 stitches. And you'll see at the top of the pattern, it says the chain 2 at the beginning of the rows does not count as a stitch. So this chain 2 is not going to count as a stitch. We will have double crochet in the first stitch. So I'm going to yarn over my hook. I'm going to go into the top of this very first stitch here and create a half double crochet. Now, the rest of the stitches we're going to work along these double crochets we completed are post stitches. And we're doing that so that way we get this very nice subtle ribbing right here at the bottom of your T. So we're going to do front post and back post double crochets along the row. And if you've never done a post stitch before, don't be scared. It really is, it's not a very difficult task. Normally when you create a stitch, we go through those 2 loops right there, right? We go underneath the V, we go through that hole, however you want to think of it. When you do a post stitch, our goal is to work around the post of that stitch. So instead of going into or underneath that V up there, we're going to go around the post of this stitch. So the first one is a double crochet front post. So I've yarned over my hook. I'm going to go over here. I'm going from the right side. I'm going to insert my hook, go around the back, come out the left side and out. If you're left-handed, it's the opposite. Now you can see here, my hook, it's worked around that, that post. And I hate to say it's worked around the back, but it is, right? My hook is behind the post, but we're creating a front post. All right, we're creating a front post. So the way I like to think about it, if I'm distinguishing between the two, is before I go into the post, my hook is in front of my work. Before I go into the post for a back post, my hook is behind my post. You guys see that? So a front post, my hook is in front. I'm going from right, go around the post, out to the left, yarn over, and then I'm going to bring my hook that same path. So I go out the left, behind, back out the right, and come up. I have 3 loops on my hook, yarn over, draw through 2, yarn over, draw through 2. So we complete the double just like any sort of double. It's all different because of how we create that post stitch. So after you've done a front post, you're going to do a back post. So I yarn over my hook, go behind my work, right? Back post means I'm going to put my hook in back. And same thing, I'm going to come up the right side, go over top of that post and come out the left side. So now my hook is in front, my post is in back. I yarn over my hook and I'm going to bring my hook the same path back. I come out the left, over the top, come back out the right and up. When you pull that loop up, you guys, just as a side note, make sure it is in front of the 2 loops that are already on your hook. Okay? Then we just complete the double crochet. So we have a front post and then a back post. We're going to do this all the way down to the last 2 stitches. And remember that our turning chain here is going to count as a stitch according to the instructions. So I just carry on. I yarn over my hook. I'm going to do a front post. Just going to be quiet here and just let you guys watch. And then I'm going to do a back post. See that? Now I'm going to keep working these all the way down the row. And as I do that, I'm going to sit here and talk a little bit. For those of you who might be thinking to yourself, you know what, I really like this crochet tee, but the last thing I want is some ribbing around my stomach. You're like, yeah, this is cool and all, but this is not where I really want some ribbing. Well, I will tell you that this yarn is really nice and forgiving. It doesn't pull in super snug with the ribbing. So the ribbing itself is more decorative than an actual like cinch in ribbing, like on my sleeves here, you know what I mean? It's more of a decorative. It lays flat on the actual piece. So it's a nice little addition. But if you decide you don't want ribbing, maybe you just want to jump right into the pattern, you could do that. or you could do a couple rows of just single crochets if you want. The ribbing there, as I said, it does look really nice, but I also understand that there are people who just don't want ribbing anywhere around their stomach. So I will just throw that out there because I know some people will happen to ask me. Now, the great thing about doing ribbing like this, where it's a front post and then a back post and then a front post and a back post, is that when we turn our work and we continue our ribbing, we really don't even have to look at the pattern too much. We just know that if we're looking at a front post, we're going to front post double crochet. And if you're looking at a back post, you're going to back post double crochet. All right, so I repeated that all the way down to the last 2 stitches. I'll end with the front post double crochet right here, right? Which is perfect because that completes my sequence. So I'll do my front post double crochet. And then it says a half double crochet into the last stitch. So that's my marked stitch there. I'm going to place a half double crochet into my marked stitch. I'm going to set this down. Can you see? It looks pretty nice right there. Pretty nice. And then this is the actual piece. So right here, these are the post stitches as they're stacked on each other. Okay. So I'm going to get started on the next row because I want you to see, because it's row 3 and it's a repeat of these 2 rows that actually creates the pattern. Okay. So we would turn our work, row 3, you chain 2. Does that count as a stitch? And the crowd says no. So I'm actually just going to remove my marker because I don't need it anymore. And we'll put a half double crochet right here into the top of this half double crochet we just completed before. And now we continue on, and you'll see here it says double crochet back post. Well, even if I didn't look at that, I know that it would be a back post because I'm looking at a back post. See how that one looks like it's a back post and this one looks like it's a front post? So if it looks like it's a back post and I want to create this stitch pattern ribbing, then I'm going to do a back post one around that one. So I'm going to come around the back, go right around the post, yarn over, pull through my loop, bring it up, and then yarn over, draw through 2, yarn over, draw through 2. I can see the next one looks like a front post. Can you guys see how that looks like a front post? So it makes it very easy for me to know, okay, if it's a front post, I want to make sure I'm working a front post because I want those to be stacked on top of each other. And I work this all the way down, back post, front post, back post, front post. Now, if you've never done these post stitches before and you're thinking, oh man, I want to make something with this later on, I'm going to just kind of like tuck this little nugget aside. I want to tell you that doing post stitches really eats up your yarn a lot. So make sure you have enough yarn, and you can get yarn at Michael's. I know they have a full variety of yarn in their aisles there, but you can get it at yarnspirations.com. Or if you are like me and have a nice little stash going on, make sure you grab yourself enough of the yarn you want to use if you're going to create something with this particular stitch, which is a really great unisex stitch, right? It's not very masculine, it's not very feminine. It's a good all-around stitch to have knowledge of. Now, when I complete this row, the instructions then say that I'm supposed to repeat the last 2 rows once more, and then a row 2 once more. So let's see here. We're going to get to the end of this. And we're going to just go ahead and just carry on with the instructions. Even though it says to do this a couple more times, I'm not going to, because by this point, you guys can just rewind the video if you need to look at it some more. Okay. Sound good to everybody? Hands up? Yeah? Awesome. Thank you, Gina. Thank you. Oh man, so many of you all waved at me at the same time. That's fantastic. All right, so get to the end here. So that one I end with a back post, and then I'm going to come here and I finish with my half double crochet at the end, and then I would turn my work.
Marley, we've had a couple of questions here about
Sure.
substituting this particular pattern with a different yarn.
Mm-hmm. So this is considered a worsted weight yarn. I will say it's a light worsted weight, isn't it? It's worsted weight is what I have in my notes. It's a lighter worsted weight. It's a very nice soft yarn. I'm using a Super Saver right here, and it is a little bit thicker. I mean, as I bring over, you can see here, just doing 2 rows, I'm a little bit bigger than this one. But what I could do is I could lower my hook size to get my gauge correct. At the end of the day, you guys, you can choose any yarn you want to use that you like the resulting fabric with the gauge given in the pattern. Okay. The good news about this fabric itself, it's a single crochet chain 1 fabric. So it's a very lightweight fabric. You can see there, it has a nice stretch. If you've done plan pooling before, this is the moss stitch. This is exactly what you do plan pooling with all the time. So it's a very comfortable fabric, but the yarn itself, it's a very rounded type of yarn. It's a very rounded yarn. It's a lighter on the worsted weight side. It's a very soft. Personally, I mean, I like the idea of using a cotton. I would probably even use like a, gosh, I'm trying to think of what else. Yeah, it's 60 cotton, 40 acrylic. It has a really nice hand to it. Does that help answer any questions?
A couple of people are just wondering if you think 100% cotton would work with this.
Oh yeah, I totally do. I mean, it's going to be heavy. So you do have to account for that. Meaning, all right, so I've already told you, like I'm a 2X, 3X. If I were going to make a 2X, 3X size, I do want to make sure that once it's made, that it's not going to be so heavy that it's going to hang so low off of my shoulders and that my armholes are no longer going to be in the correct place. Like they're going to droop really far down and like show my bra band. You know what I mean? So you have to, I mean, and that's just with anything, guys. You have to plan that out with the yarn you plan on using. You have to take into account the weight of the yarn. If that helps. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So I think where everybody's good here, you get the whole idea of the ribbing. So I'm going to move on so that way we can see how we would proceed. So we're going to pretend that this is the right side, which it might be. I'm just not even going to pay attention to it. It doesn't matter to me, but we're going to proceed to where this would be the first row. Okay. So the first row of your piece. So you would chain 1. And then it says single crochet in the first stitch. Then chain, skip the next stitch, 1 single crochet in the next stitch. Repeat from star. So you'll chain, skip a stitch, single crochet in the next stitch. Now, as I'm doing this, I want you to pay attention to something, because the number one problem with this particular stitch pattern, which by the way, can I tell you, I love this stitch pattern. Like I've created an entire garment with this stitch pattern called the Hamilton cardigan. And I just love it. But what happens is as we get going along and we become more and more comfortable, we start to tighten up that chain right there. That little tiny little stitch right there becomes a little bit of a pain because we start to make it really nice and tight. And as we move along later on in our fabric, it becomes a little bit narrower at the top than at the bottom because of that little tiny chain. So you want to be very careful when you're doing that chain. So we get through the first row, you really can't see a whole lot here, right? It's just a single crochet, chain 1, single crochet, chain 1, and you're skipping a stitch in between there. So when you turn and we're on row 2, you chain 1, single crochet in the first single crochet in the next chain 1 space. And now we're going to carry on. So we will chain 1, skip the single, go to the next chain 1 space, which is that big gap there, and single crochet there. Chain 1, skip a single, go to the big space, and single crochet. So here's what you can do as you're working along to make sure that your chains are the same size. When you do your chain, make sure that as you take your hook and if you were to point where your next stitch is going to go, make sure the size of your chain here, the V at the top, is the same width as the stitch you're skipping. If it's tighter, it's going to narrow your entire piece. And if it's tighter even by a little bit, if you do that in each one of those chains across, it's going to be significant, okay? So you just want to make sure that your chain is the same width as the stitch you're skipping. Can you see? There's the width of my chain. There's the width of my single crochet. It's the same. So I know when I complete my single crochet here, it's going to be nice and even across. Now, does that mean every single stitch you kind of have to do that little measurement thing? No, not at all. You'll start to get comfortable. But if you start to notice that your rows are getting too snug, then that's something you're going to want to pay attention to. And if you've done it too snug over maybe like a whole inch or so, I will tell you from experience, I would rip that inch out and redo it, just because it's just not going to look right when the whole piece is done. Now, when you get to the end of your third row, you're going to end with a single crochet. Like you're going to, gosh, I can't even think. Right here, you're going to single crochet at the end there. So that way it all matches up. Okay.
Marley, we have a question here about checking your gauge. So
Yes.
where in the project, like which stitches would you recommend that they check their gauge with?
So when it says in pattern, so the gauge itself says 17 stitches and 18 rows in pattern. Now the pattern itself doesn't tell you what the pattern stitch is. However, the majority of the piece is done with this moss stitch pattern. So I would use this, which is why I said, if you wanted to follow along with what I'm doing right here, you could use this as your stitch gauge. So you're not going to measure your ribbing, because it didn't tell you in ribbing, it says in pattern. And my educated assumption would be it should be in this moss stitch pattern. So this is where you would just continue on repeating rows 2 and 3 of this particular moss stitch pattern. And then you would measure it out to make sure that you are getting the correct gauge. And this is a good size. Like this, remember when I was talking earlier about you don't want to make it too small? Like this is a good size to go with. So I think I chained 23. It was either 23 or 25. I should have written it down. But if you wanted to give that a whirl, you could do that. And then you would just measure out and count your stitches. Now, I will tell you also, when you're counting your stitches for this particular pattern, the designer counts the chain spaces as a stitch, because later on we have to skip stitches to create the armholes. And I noticed as I was reading through the instructions, where normally I would count just the single crochets as a stitch because the chains are a chain, right? Like I guess that's what I think. But the pattern will say, skip 37 stitches. Well, if you just counted 37 single crochets, you would run out of single crochets to count. So the pattern actually wants us to count the single crochet and then the chains. That would be 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6. Does that make sense? So when you go to check your gauge, make sure you're counting your chain spaces as a stitch when you're checking your gauge. Okay. So I'm just working along here. All right, what's the question? Would that question just come up?
Oh, a few people are just wondering if you were to substitute with a size 3 yarn, how much more yarn would you need, and how much would that change your construction?
So a size 3 yarn in this. So the biggest thing there, the first thing, all right, let me talk through this as if I was doing this. The first thing I would do is I would see if I could get gauge with my size 3 yarn. I would see, what does the fabric look like when I use a size 3 yarn and I'm getting the gauge that's listed. And I would decide if I like that or not. If I decide I don't like it, maybe I think it's too loose, then that's where I would essentially have to start rewriting the pattern, right? Because I'd have to start taking whatever gauge I got. So let's say for this one, it was 17 stitches. Let's say that I found a gauge that I found it was more comfortable with 20 stitches. And so then I would have to say, all right, I'll take the measurements that are given in the schematic. And so, for example, the smallest size on the bottom, it says that it's 20 inches across. So if I had, I don't have a calculator here. If I had 20 stitches equals 4 inches, that would be 5 stitches per inch. So I would take 5 times 20 inches, and that would give me 100. So I'd have 100 stitches would give me 20 inches for the body. And looking at this pattern, I know I need an odd number. So I would just round it up to like 101 stitches. And then I could carry on with that. And then so on and so forth. Whenever the next sizing portion happened, you'd have to make adjustments for that. Does that make sense? So at the end of the day, you end up rewriting an entire pattern to fit your needs if you don't like the way the fabric looks with your chosen yarn. Did that answer the question?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank
Okay.
you.
I mean, I won't lie, guys, like a size 3 weight yarn would look really good with this. And it actually, the gauge might not be too terrible. You might actually really like it. I'm not entirely sure, but you might. So can you see how this starts to come up? The fabric looks pretty good here. I like it. Right, I'm gonna take a drink real quick and I'm gonna answer any sort of questions you have going on here. So, all right, go ahead. When I'm crocheting, I don't see the questions pop up, so I rely on you a lot.
Could you increase the hook, change your hook size, and instead of changing your number of stitches?
You could, but you have to, it all boils down to your happiness with your gauge, the fabric you're getting. So like this fabric here, I'm using Super Saver here, and it's I mean, it's a little bit loose. It's not super stiff. It's nothing like Kevlar, but it's nothing as like drapey as this one. You see what I mean? Like it's super drapey on this one. But yes, changing your hook size to achieve the gauge, that's what I was saying. Whatever hook you need to use to get the gauge with whatever yarn you're using. Once that is done, so say you're getting this gauge, but you're using a smaller yarn. I don't even have a smaller yarn here in front of me, but say you decide to use a smaller yarn. And so you use a bigger hook to get the correct gauge and you're happy with that fabric, then yeah, absolutely make the piece. Okay.
Fantastic.
Okay. So I got to see here. I think I just finished. That was a row 2. So I got to do a row 3. Oh no, ending on a right side row. So yeah, I have to do a row 3, which is the right side. All right, so I have to do a right side row here. So let me do this right side row. Because the pattern tells me to end after a right side row. Would you recommend just a single color yarn with this pattern, or could you use multicolor? You could absolutely use a multicolor with this because the stitch pattern itself there's not a whole lot of action going on, right? It's just that it's a step lighter, a step different from just plain single crochets. So yeah, you could absolutely use a multicolor or a variegated yarn with this and just get a different look, as long as having the front and back look different for you is not a deal breaker. Some people just can't handle that. They can't handle the front and the back looking different. As long as you're okay with the front and back looking different, you'd be all right. All right, so I finished on a right side. So what I'm going to do here is you keep following these instructions right here until this part of your piece measures the distance written in the pattern. So 12 inches, 3 inches, or 14 inches. Then we have to shape for the armholes. So what's going to happen is we're on the wrong side of our work. When we turn our work here, we're going to be on the wrong side of our work. So let's do this. I'm going to put my marker over here to represent that this is the right side. So I'm on the wrong side of my work. It says I'm going to slip stitch in each of the first 4 stitches or 6 stitches or 8 stitches, depending on the size I'm making. So all that means is go ahead, put your hook into the first one and just do a slip stitch. I say just do it, and then I slip my yarn. And what we're doing here is we're essentially just bringing our work over so that we can create just the front portion of our piece instead of working all the way across. So we're giving ourselves actual armholes. That was 1, 2, 3, 4. Then it says chain 1, single crochet in the same stitch as the last slip stitch. And then it says pattern to last 3 stitches and turn. So right here, I know I'm on a wrong side row, which would be a row 2. So is that correct? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. So for my pattern, I should, it should be skipping right there. I think I went 1 too far. Right? Because it's a single, single. Hold on, I got to work through this. Row 1 and 3 are both right sides. And I just finished a row 3, which has me start with a single crochet in the first stitch, chain 1, skip a single crochet. Oh, I did it. I did not end on a row 3. I ended on a row 2. So I'm going to skip 1 row. I ended on the wrong one. All right, so this one. So this is the wrong side. Sorry, guys, I was talking and got distracted. But if you guys ever do the same thing, this is exactly what you would do, is decipher what row you're working onto so that you can figure it out. So row 3 is the right side row, and that started us off with the single crochet in the first, and then chain 1, and then single crochet over there. So that's important because that allows us, as we jump into the armhole shaping, to get to the correct stitch. Now I'm going to slip stitch 4. So there's 1, 2, 3, and 4 puts me into that chain space, which is perfect because then I would chain 1, single crochet in the same space as the slip stitch I went into. And now it says work the pattern to the last 3 stitches. So we work our established pattern, which this would be a row, the second row, right? Because we finished a 3rd row and the 2nd row is a wrong side. So we would single crochet in our first one. Is that right? Am I doing this right? Single crochet in the first single crochet, 1 single crochet in the next, chain 1, skip the next single crochet, blah, blah. So you would carry on and keep working. Why do I feel like I'm off still? The odd number of rows are the right side, correct. Did I end funny? Did I end incorrectly? Yeah, I ended wrong. Jeez Louise. No, can't be. Single, skip, single, all the way down to the last 2 stitches, chain 1, skip, single. We want to get into pattern. So I'll slip stitch in the first 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. For me, this would be chain 1 and single there. And then I would single here, chain 1, skip, single, chain 1, skip, single, chain 1, skip, single. So essentially, if you can make it to where you're back into pattern to the last 3 stitches. So here's 1, 2, 3. So this would be my last stitch. I would leave these 3 unworked. And what I would do is I would carry on just working across those stitches that don't have the slip stitches, just working back and forth on those. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right, good. And this is how you would keep going. So you just maintain the pattern. All right, so I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about just maintaining the pattern is what you want to ultimately do. So as you continue working, then we have armholes here and armholes here. Now, one thing you could do when I work on patterns, I have another pattern that I wrote that's very similar to this, is I kept a Post-it note, and I kept like hash marks on how many rows I did. So that way I could have the back and the front of the sweater match. So I made sure I had exactly the same number of rows. Y'all understand what I'm saying there? So that way, when I got to this part of the pattern, I could make it match completely. Now, once you've come in with the armhole shaping, you continue on until this portion right here, measures 5.5, 6, or 6.5 inches. Now, what that's giving you, it's giving you your armhole depth, not including your shoulder. So that's creating your armhole depth here. So I'm just going to get a couple more rows in here just so that we can have a look of what's going on. I'm just keeping up with the pattern, so I'm just going to keep going. How many of you have done sweaters or such like this before, where you have to slip stitch in or skip stitches and make things work out correctly? Never. This is my first. Awesome. It's actually easier than what you might think. Like, it's for me, I often will tell people, I'm like, just don't overthink it. Just keep your pattern consistent. Make sure you're skipping the stitches that you need to, because you're just creating an opening for your arms and an opening for your neck. So this is actually one of the easier patterns to do as far as a first timer sort of pattern. Okay. So as you're going back and forth. Now, the next part of the instructions talk about the neck shaping. So what it's ultimately doing here, I'm going to move this and bring this in. What we've done is right down here. Now this has an edging on it. Okay. So don't get confused by that. But right here, this is where the slip stitches were brought in, and then it picked up the pattern and it worked across the pattern to, well, actually, no, it worked across the pattern all the way over here to this side, and it had the 3 stitches where it stopped. Okay. So then the body itself was worked back and forth to create this armhole all the way up to this neckline. Now, in order for us to make sure that we have a neckline here and it's not going to choke us when we put on our sweater, this is where we're going to create our shoulders. So the instructions say shape neck, but in reality, you're creating your shoulders. Like you're creating a neck opening, but you're working on your shoulders. Like the next part of the instructions are to work on the shoulders. So as we look at this little piece here that we're doing on our truncated little piece, what would happen here is essentially, if we were to dumb it down, we have our armhole opening here, which those would be on the side of our body, right? So they would kind of tuck in. And so let's say we wanted our neck opening like right here. Well, that just means that we would get our work over here and we'd work across to a certain point, like say to that point right there. And we would stop working, and then you just work back and forth until the shoulder measures the correct length, right? Correct length, fasten off, and then you go to the next one. Typically on all patterns, and I think this pattern is incorrect because I think this is the way it should be, you do this on the right side, so the right side of the fabric, you work back and forth, you fasten off, you come back to the right side, you skip over all the stitches you want on your neckline, join your yarn, and you work this side of the shoulder. Now the instructions say for the second shoulder, it says with wrong side facing, skip 37. Well, if I did that, work with me here. Let's say we did this one, okay? Let's just use some markers here. We come over, we stop right here, and we're gonna imagine we did a shoulder right here, okay? So this would be the right side. Now the pattern says, okay, turn to the wrong side. So it says turn to the wrong side. And then it says skip 37 stitches. Let's say we had 37 stitches. Well, I'd be over here skipping 37 stitches. And then it says join yarn with a slip stitch and continue working. Well, I would be working this shoulder again. Do you see what I mean? Like it shouldn't be that way. So it should be that you're still on the right side. You finish this shoulder, you fasten it off, you come back down here. You could think of it as working across 37 stitches. So you count 37 stitches. Ideally, that'll leave you the same number of stitches for this shoulder as what you had over here. That's usually the goal for a designer, is you want this shoulder and this shoulder to match, right? So if we had 21 stitches over here, we ultimately want 21 stitches over here, which is exactly what's written in the pattern where it says first row, it says work across evenly over 21 stitches, right? So if we don't overthink it, if we just look at the pattern, look at what we're doing, and just think about it logically, hey, when it's time for our neck, here, we're working back and forth, When it's time for my neck, on this shoulder, I'm going to work across 21 stitches or whatever you're doing for the size you're making. And you're just going to work back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. All right, so that's 21. And then you're going to stay back on the right side. You're going to skip 37 stitches. So that would be 58 stitches, right? 58 stitches total. So from this edge all the way across to right here, that would be 58 stitches. Or if you think of it from right here to right here, it's 37 stitches. You're going to join your yarn and then work across 21 stitches over here, which will get you back to your 85 stitches. You with me? Like logically, this is very, very easy, which is great for a first sweater pattern, because even if the pattern is confusing, which they totally can be, because crochet patterns are confusing, if you step back and think of it logically of what are you doing, which typically crocheters are really good at, this is it. This is all you're doing. You're creating a space for your neck and head to go into. All right. Now you only do this for the front. You only have to do this little shoulder section here for the front. When it's time for the back, you work up to where we did the armholes. You slip stitch over just like you did, work across, leave those stitches open. But instead of stopping at a certain point, you continue all the way up to the top. Now I'll give you a little side note here, you guys. As personally as a designer, I like to make it like 1 or 2 rows where I do very similar to what I did on the front, just 1 or 2 rows right here to where the back neck, it drops a little bit. It just fits better. Like overall, in my experience, you don't have to do that. The pattern's not written that way, but my experience is even just 1 row, just a little bit that gives you just your back neck, a little bit of a dip in the back. It lays better. You with me so far? I know I'm talking a lot, but I feel like, to me, explaining it this way is much better than putting it on a hook, because it can be very confusing. You know what I mean? Allie, how we doing? You're on mute, hon. There you go. Makes perfect sense. That's what I see. I like the idea of the back matching. Now, here's the thing. You can absolutely, because this isn't that deep, you know what I mean? This isn't that deep at all. You could absolutely make the front and the back the exact same, like a tank top. You absolutely could do that. Absolutely. One thing that I would be a little bit careful of, with this portion here, like the shoulder portion, it's nice and narrow right here for the smaller sizes. But those of you out there who are like big girls like me, who are going to make the larger sizes, you'll notice that this section here is like almost 8 inches wide. So that, like, if you're looking, like, can you go to my face, Felicia? Like, let's be real here. Like, this from here to here is not 8 inches. So it's going to just cup off a little bit more. But you want to be careful if you're going to do any sort of alterations down here where you slip stitch for the armhole, because you don't want to slip stitch too far over and then things fall out. Like, that's not going to be pretty. So something that you can do is you can come over and then kind of do like a gradual sort of thing like this to make the shoulder a little bit more narrow. And you could also make the neckline a little bit wider if you want, or I'm totally giving you guys suggestions for alterations, but if you wanted a V-neck, you could, we thought through this logically, right? Like we made it so, can you guys hear me if I'm backing up like this? We made it to where we left this neckline opening way up here, but maybe we stop down here and we stop where we just have like 3 stitches open here. And then we gradually like move it over, just over and over until we get to this point. You could get a nice V-neck coming up, which is very flattering. There's a lot of little options you can do when it comes to a very simple fabric like this and making those alterations. The last thing that you would do when you're making this thing, all right, Felicia, we can go to my hands, is the final edging. Now, you can see here on my piece, like the edging, it's a little bit rigidy and rockety there. This part would actually be in the seam, but I'm going to get that same look as I'm working along my edge, as I'm working up the armhole here, right? So the final edging is just a very simple single crochet edging all around, just to clean it up and make it look nice and neat. Can you see that? Same thing around the neckline. Yeah, a V-neck. I would totally make this in a V-neck. Like the V-neck, especially for larger girls, V-neck is very flattering. Like it's a very flattering look. And it's a great way to, you can, I mean, a V-neck, I can bring it in all the way over here and it's not going to, it's just going to look good. I don't know. It's personal experience. I design a lot for big girls because I want to wear the stuff I make. But yeah, I mean, this is relatively easy. Sort of a side note, a whole nother thing you guys could do. If you didn't want to come in like this is a modified drop shoulder is what this is called, where you come in a little bit and then you just come straight up where there's no shaping. You could just leave this flat and make it cap sleeve if you're into cap sleeves, and you could do like a shell around the outside and make something fun on a cap sleeve, or go straight up. And if you're familiar with how to make sleeves, just, a sleeve, fold it over, attach it to this, all of a sudden you have a long sleeve sweater. Yeah. I don't know. It's pretty good, pretty easy stuff. Are there any other questions? I guess you can go to my face, Felicia. Hi again. I mean, my goal here was to try and tackle everything that you might have come up with against this pattern. I think my biggest piece of advice, guys, whenever you're picking up a pattern like this or other patterns, always read through it and try and like logically think through what the pattern is asking you to do. Because 9 times out of 10, you're able to like bypass the pattern and be like, all right, I need this many stitches over here. I need this many stitches over here, and then go. Like it doesn't have to be too hard. How would the cap sleeve work? Cap sleeve, honestly, the cap sleeve is, instead of the area where it says shape armholes, you totally bypass that. You just go straight up. The other thing you'd have to remember is obviously your stitch counts would be different for your shoulders. You'd have more stitches because you would not have eliminated the stitches from your slip stitches. So you would have wider shoulders, and that's how you get a cap sleeve. It's that easy. That easy. Cool. Simple. Yes, very simple. Good. And it's comfortable. Like I'm holding this, guys. It's a very comfortable feel. I designed a sweater, a knit sweater with this yarn recently, and it's gorgeous. I can't wait to share it with the world because it's so pretty. But yeah, gosh, there's so many familiar faces here. It's so nice to see all of you. All right, Allie, go ahead. I can see you like biting at the bit to talk.
There are just a couple of questions that popped in here at the end. Would you be able to use multiple sizes in the pattern?
Yes. So here's the hard part. You'd have to do shaping. So if you are comfortable with crochet and you're comfortable with doing some sort of shaping, this would be a good pattern to dabble in shaping, because maybe you're a little bit more hippie and you have a much narrow bust. So you need more down here than you do up here. You could do some shaping in the body of your piece to get up to, maybe you start off with a 2X, but you have to get up to a 1X. So you would figure out, okay, let's just use round numbers we're going to start with 100 stitches, but I need to get down to 80 stitches, which means I need to eliminate 20 stitches. Okay, if I need to eliminate 20 stitches, that would be 10 stitches on each side. Now, am I going to do 10 stitches on each side where it's 2 on front, 2 on back? Or is it going to be just 2 stitches and 2 stitches? Like how am I going to do that? So you would start to do a lot of math to decipher how many stitches do you need to start with? How many stitches do you need to get to? How many rows do you have to eliminate the number of stitches you need to eliminate going from bottom up? And then following the pattern, what are you going to do to make those adjustments? And then at that point, you could start off with the 2X numbers, do your decreasing shaping, whatever you need to get up to the 1X numbers, and then follow the 1X numbers for the rest of the pattern. You guys with me on that? I mean, it's math. I mean, not going to lie, it's a lot of math, but you could do it. I mean, shoot, guys, if I can do this, you can do this. Like, you got to trust me on this. You can do it. It just takes a little bit of time to sit down and work through it. Awesome. How might I shape this for having a larger bust? That's a good question. So there are things called short row shaping that you could incorporate into something like this. It would be a lot more labor intensive. The hardest part with this is, I mean, I don't know how large a bust is. You know what I mean? Like, are you like, you know, a double G, or are you just like a double D? Like, there's a difference there, right? When you're dealing with patterns like that, that's where you really have to get more into precise shaping. That would be like short row shaping, to where giving yourself sort of like darts, not sort of, they're darts. Like if you were to sew something for yourself, where you would put darts into your work, you'd have to do something like that.
Okay. Wonderful. Perfect.
12 inches includes the ribbing, correct? No. So I just got a direct message from Elizabeth, and she's asking me if the 12 inches on the body includes the ribbing. And the answer is no. And here's how I know. And here's how I found out, because this is important for everybody else to pay attention to. Look at the schematic. And what I did is I just looked at the schematic, and I looked to be where the 12 inches is added in the schematic. Let me see here. I see a 12 there. Ooh, it is added. Yes, it is. I was looking at the bottom number. See, I wasn't paying attention to my colors. Yes, it is, because I can look at the schematic, and from the armhole to the bottom, it says 10 for the smallest number, and it says 2 inches for the ribbing, which would give you a total of 12. So yes, 12 includes the ribbing when you're working for the body. Can you make that longer? Absolutely. Can you make it longer and then add vents? You know, instead of sewing the whole piece together down here at the bottom, like leave the ribbing part open and leave it as a vent? Absolutely, you could do that. I got all the tricks, people, all the tricks. Iris is laughing at me. Iris, I like you. You can come back whenever you want. All right.
Perfect. And so, Marley, can you remind everybody of what your Instagram handle is in case they have any other questions?
Sure. So I am the Marley Bird on Instagram. I'm also Marley Bird over on Facebook, and I'm Marley Bird on YouTube. But on Facebook, it's a great place to be a part of everything. And then, yeah, on Instagram, I'm the Marley Bird. No E in my name, just Marley, Marly.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Marley, for today's class. It was fantastic. And thank you, everybody, so much for joining us. Just a reminder that if you need to watch the video again, the recording should be available in about 24 to 48 hours. Perfect. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much.
Thanks, guys.